Building on that, do you have any plans to use the same techniques to rewrite toppled structures or to use the piping method to replant the red mangrove seeds or other human-based things that we can encourage the growth or that already we have here?
Right, so she's asking, can we restabilize corals that have been toppled and try and put them back in place, and that might help secure them and start them to grow on in the future.
Yeah,
Those-
are there
okay.
plans for
And
that
for the-
with effort?
Right. So there are some, that was not done here. And we're probably outside that window of opportunity. Because right now those toppled corals, if they're alive, they're probably already doing that on their own. And what we don't want to do is disrupt that resheeting that's taking place right now. If we could have done this maybe months ago, that might have been a viable alternative, but we didn't have the infrastructure to do anything. We were still taking care of
very,
ourselves.
very busy.
So I think we've missed the window of opportunity for that. And that also is developing science. How best to stabilize, what species respond best to what techniques. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information on how best to do this. So we haven't jumped into just writing things and then doing it down. We've got colleagues at Buck Island that are working on this. They have a plot where they've stabilized 20 fragments of Velcro coral and a plot where they've left 20 alone. And they're going to see how they do. So that's kind of where we're at with those type of things. I don't know anything about pipe technique with mangroves. Do you know anything about like, how that works? Or is
Oh,
this
the PVC pipes?
Yeah.
I just know that,
Yeah. So I'm not familiar. We're not familiar with those.
What are the risks of sunblock and how can you minimize it
What are the risks of sunblock?
to corals?
Okay, I'll jump into it. So some of the early work on the sunscreen effects were done here by some of your collaborators. And they found a couple things happens, that there's chemical in the sunscreen, and you got to get out your magnifying glass. It's in the active ingredient, it's really small, it's the oxyunzones. So it can be oxybenzone, oxyhexone, oxysomzone. And that interferes with either the coral landing on the bottom and turning it into a new coral, or its ability to divide. So the best thing we can recommend, and this is still in developing science, is to wear sunscreens that have metals in them, as opposed to the chemical sunscreens that have titanium dioxide, as opposed to the oxybenzone type of active ingredients. Don't just go with the label that says reef safe, because like organic, there's no organic police, there's no reef safe police that will take a product off the shelf, right? So you've got to be the consumer, look at the really small, really small active ingredients, and you're wanting something that's more like heavy metals based, like titanium dioxide, than is more chemical based.
even some people are even now saying that the zinc and titanium are not great for the reefs either, but they're better. So they tell you to wear, cover yourself up, but it's really not, it's a safety concern if I go snorkeling covered up entirely in my tramp. So you've got to be really careful. But I feel that the science hasn't really, I don't feel like the science is that good yet on just what which ingredients are really a problem. We know the oxybenzone. There's just a lot of unanswered questions, and the best you can do is wear as little of those sunscreens as possible. But you have to be careful in the sun. So it is difficult.
What's the feasibility of turning the entire park area, shores of St. John, into no-take zones with no lobsters, no anything, no fishing? What's the feasibility of that? Who do we have to talk to we get that rolling? At least for say for 10 years.
So he's asking, what's the feasibility of turning the park into a no-take zone? Probably very minimal. I don't think that's going to happen. The legislation that creates the park is written, and it's a law. So it would take actually an act of Congress on Yeah, so that's why we do talks like this, is to try and spread that information. And I try and talk nicely to people about, know the rules, know where you can fish, where you shouldn't fish, and hopefully we minimize that kind of thing. Yeah.
The Cassiopeia out there in Moore Creek, they were everywhere before the storm. After the storm, they went anywhere, they coming back out.
So the Cassiopeia is the upside down jellyfish that carpeted the bottom in Wolf Creek. They disappeared, so they probably got just broken up and torn away. Are they coming back? They likely will come back. That's an ideal habitat for them. So unfortunately, if you guys are swimming Wolf Creek, you'll probably see them back eventually. But you can enjoy the time without them. We call that the biodiversity. They'll be back.
I was out at Fort Creek not too long ago when I posted a video on my Snorkel SDJ Facebook page called Living Snowflakes. I mean, I was in there after the hurricane, and it was like white, just fully covered with upside down mangrove jellyfish. So they're here. I mean, there's every square foot of the Fort Creek Bay was covered.
Gotta love biodiversity. Yep.
I have a question about the mangroves. You mentioned earlier, Caroline, that there was really very little data, that we can look at prior to the storm for mangroves, but you were talking about the leaf cover. So is there any way now, if we don't have it, one, do we have data from before on water temperature when we had full leaf cover? And if not, can you still move forward with some kind of measurement system for what this new scenario that we have without leaf cover will do to the water temperatures, and how will that affect the growth that was there and in its ability to come back?
What we do have is a few years ago.
Repeat the question.
Well, that'll be hard to read.
Did everybody hear that? No. Okay, I asked her, because there's no data.
There are some data on, the question is about the conditions in the mangroves before and after the storms and how the canopy might be affecting the water temperature. Can't do total justice to your question, but we know that from some measurements that Kim Yates took a few years ago, that the leaves from the mangrove trees were cutting down the sunlight by about 70%. So it's a large number. So when you lose those trees, you are really radically changing. And I should mention, I didn't get into all this, but it's not just the temperature of the water, it's more that light, the irradiance, the high light levels are also stressful to corals and play a role in bleaching of corals. So the shade to me is a really significant, the loss of the shade is a very significant factor. We do have some previous data on water temperature. We might be able, most of those were, the ovotemmeters were pretty close to the canopy. So we might have some where there weren't trees shading them. I would not anticipate a huge difference in the actual water temperature. I think it's more the light, the radiance.
Given that the warming trends you showed are probably closely linked to global warming and climate change, do you have any kind of long-term prognosis for the survival of our reefs? I mean, given that, all the problems, that's a big question.
We actually had a guy model the water temperature data, and they're hopeful that it's peaking. There is a more climatological look at the water temperature, which is the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, of which these Caribbean reefs are a part of that. We are in an upswing of the AMDO. It's hopeful that if we're near the top, we get to go down the other side, which means that instead of a warming environment, we'll be cooling down. Now, is it's never been this warm with this many of us on the planet, so the experiment is still kind of ongoing. But his 5-year model was that our temperature increases were going to plateau. So we hope that there is some adaptation, that the thermally tolerant corals will prosper in this warmer environment if they can survive. And that's where our future lies. Right. And we don't know which ones those are, so we got to take care of them all. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, right. And so Caroline just reminded me that at Yawsey, from 2009 to 2017, even though those temperatures were going up, it did return back to nearly its pre-2005 coral cover values. Now the details was it wasn't the same species that died that caused the increase, right? So it was different species that grew. So a little shift there. But you know, when a fire ravages the Yellowstone National Park, it's not the redwoods that jump up and grow right after the fire, right? You get some seedling. Sorry, Ellen, I don't know what I'm talking about. But I mean, you get the smaller stuff. You get the smaller stuff that comes up in first, and then you eventually a succession takes place. The fact that we got growing reefs is the good part. You know, so there still is hope. I believe. In the back.
So you gave us some examples of the elkhorn corals, how they did. Can you say more generally, like especially like big stands like in Hawk's Nest where there was really huge elkhorn colonies, and I guess in Haulover and other places. I mean, in general, were there some that were okay, or did they mostly fragment, or can you say?
So, yes, about the elkhorn coral. At Hawk's Nest, there was a lot of fragmentation. I'm encouraged that Hawk's Nest, that elkhorn reef wasn't just removed and put in the parking lot. I mean, so when I say there's damage, but there's coral still there, that's the good part. The fact that it's still growing is good. And you can see small little growth on those elkhorn corals that are surviving. That's the good part. Because, quite frankly, as Caroline was afraid to look, I thought that reef was going to be in the parking lot. So that's the good part. You know, that coral is so branching, so wide spaced, and in such a high energy environment. I can't imagine the turbulence that went on in those areas. And that's similar all over in the other places around where there is that one coral.
I just was going to mention that after Irma, I went over to St. Croix and I went to Buck Island Reef National Monument out to Buck Island. I don't know how many of you have been there, but that used to have amazing elkhorn, and some sections of it still look pretty good. And I took a video of it with Sandy, Phyllis Starr, and 3 days later Maria came through and
I mean, I
I don't
think
know, I mean,
the
but
Sargasso, I think it just goes to show that the Sargasso Sea, where the source of all that sargassum is still percolating just fine. And as these disturbances come through, sometimes they move that around, and that conveyor is still happening. So I don't know that it forecasts anything. I just think it is part of what we get to deal with is that stuff is still out there floating around. It's biodiversity, isn't it great?
Well, thinking of this, the seaweed, it actually is a great nutrient for the fish. I've been watching the fish. I've been watching the fish feed on that seaweed, and the last time that happened, the fish came back in abundance because of the nutrients in the water. But also, I've seen hawksbills and turbals. I've seen huge ones in Hanson Bay. I've seen some really good corals out in Salt Pond. The inner reef survived much better than the outer one, but I must have seen a dozen hawkbills and a lot of them green turtles. And I've seen the queen angelfish. I haven't been able to get a good picture of them. The fish seem more skittish to me than they ever did before.
you used to see sometimes 20 queen angels.
Yeah, but I'm seeing them.
Yeah, they're there.
So I just wanted to note that.
No, stuff's around. I mean, so that's a very good part.
Real quick about
Do we have any idea where the fish, what happens to the fish?
Wow, what happens to the fish?
Do they just die? Do they go somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, Caroline is just saying sometimes they do get thrown up on the shore. I really don't know. I mean, sometimes they get killed by getting banged into things. I mean, I can't imagine what's
Sometimes
like.
they just go deeper.
There are researchers that are coming on island next week from Woods Hole that had hydrophones down, permanently placed on the bottom. And we got to listen to what the storm sounded like underwater. And that's impressive. I mean, so, you know, to hear on land and hear what it sounds like underwater.
They need to tell us what they find.
Right, so
Share the information.
they're still working on it when they find stuff out. We had somebody who wanted to follow up on the sargassum over here.
There's an organization called SEAS, it's Sargasso Early Alert Systems out of Texas A&M University, and they monitor the sargasso weed, what stuff we